Hi, my name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craves a Book. So I'm doing a series of these videos where I talk about my most anticipated books of 2024 and I'm breaking them into different categories. So I've done contemporary romance, fantasy romance, and now I'm going to do YA. I still appreciate a good YA book every now and then from a variety of genres, so I just put them all together, and if you were still a YA reader or you have a YA reader in your life, hopefully you find some things that catch your attention. Just like in the other videos, there's no January books on this list because January is going to get its own separate video just like I do every single month, and I've been working on that one already, and we're getting some amazing YA books and just books in general in January, so look out for that video. I'm going to try to be quick with this because I think there's more books on this list than the past list because it's obviously an age category, not a genre, so we got a lot to cover in this video, so let's just jump right into it. First up, on February 6th, we actually have an anthology. I always put these anthologies on my list because I always think they're really interesting and great ways to be introduced to new authors. And this one is called Relit, and it's 16 Latinx remixes of classic stories, and this is edited by Sandra Proudman. And there are a few authors in here that I recognize. One of my favorites ever is Faridah Cordova, so if she's contributing to an anthology collection, I always put it on my TBR. But there's some others as well and some new ones to me. So I will leave a link to the Goodreads if you want to see all the authors that are contributing. So I think the title kind of gives away what this is about, but all the authors are doing different spins on classic stories. So we have Pride and Prejudice in space, Frankenstein in the depths of the ocean, The Great Gatsby on the island off the coast of Costa Rica. Whether the characters fall in love, battle foes, or grow through grief, each story will empower readers to see themselves as heroes of the stories that made our world. I just think that is a really interesting project that they're doing, and Pride and Prejudice in space, I'm down for it. On February 13th, we have Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear by Robin Wasley. And apparently this is perfect for fans of the Raven Boys and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And if you're like me, you hear a Buffy Vampire Slayer comp and you're excited but nervous. But if it has that vibe at all, I'm gonna love it. This follows Sid, who is a typical normal teenager. She is going through a lot. She's been recently humiliated romantically in front of a group of people. She's struggling to make friends, and she just happens to live in a tourist trap that was built above the fault lines that keep magic from entering our world, and the veil there is very thin. And one day a guardian of these fault lines is killed and monsters are starting to crawl through the veil, and there's a group of vigilantes running around, and Sid discovers that her missing brother is part of this group. So she decides to join the guardians to try and find her brother and save him in a sense. And obviously she also wants to close this seal, so she gets together with a ragtag crew, which I always appreciate, and they are like would-be heroes and they're misfits, but they come together and they're trying to save the world and find her brother at the same time. We're getting a new book from Hafsah Faizal on February 20th, and that is called A Tempest of Tea, and I love this cover so much. And this is actually another story that has that ragtag crew trope that I love, and it follows an orphan girl who, together with this crew, has to commit a heist with vampires. I'm here for a heist story, but you add that vampires, that takes it to another level for me. Our main character in this case is Arthi, and she runs a prestigious tea room by day that becomes an illegal blood house at night, so it caters to vampires. One day her establishment is threatened and she makes a deal with a vampire where they have to perform this heist. In order to pull this heist off, she has to infiltrate the vampire society, and she winds up in this whole conspiracy. So many of my buzzwords in this one. I know that this is a trusted author. The cover's amazing. High on my list for sure. I featured this next book in my US versus UK video where I just compare covers and choose a winner. So if you haven't seen that, I will leave that linked down below, but I liked both of these covers. I'm going to show the US one here in case you're curious. This is My Throat is an Open Grave by Tori Bovalino, and it comes out on February 20th as well. If my lighting changed, it's because I had to open my blind for my cat, and it's her world and we just live in it. But as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, this book follows Leah, who lives in Winston, Pennsylvania, and she must be right and good and holy and attend church every Sunday and take care of her brother. And when she's not in school, she's working because she is taught that if she does not do these things, she's going to be taken. And by taken, I mean taken by the Lord of the Wood. And one day when she's taking care of her brother Owen, she gets really frustrated with him. He won't stop crying. And she kind of wishes him away, as a lot of teenagers or people in general would do when they're frustrated. The Lord of the Wood happens to be listening and grants her wish. and she goes to look at Owen's crib, and all that's there is a bundle of sticks. So the only way to get her brother back is to cross the river and make a deal with the Lord of the Wood, and he is willing to make this deal in exchange for a song. She has a month to write the song, and through this process she starts to question everything that she's been taught about the Lord of the Wood himself and the people of her village and the past and its history. So that could be really interesting. I have read something by this author that I liked, but I'm really into the setup of this one. Anything where there's creepy forest or something, that always seems to work for me. This next one is really exciting because I happen to have a physical ARC, which I have started, and I'm 30 pages in, and I am in love with it. I wonder if this will be the last book I read of 2023. That would be a perfect book to end the year with because it's excellent so far. And Simon & Schuster Canada sent me this. This is Tender Beast by Liselle Sambury, who is a local author. She lives in Northern Ontario as well, so I want to support her. I've heard great things about her first book, Delicious Monster. This opens with a prologue of Sunny's mom dying. I'm not going to give you the details. You have to experience for yourself, but I was kind of shocked. And then chapter 1 opens with Sunny and her family sitting on a couch with the lawyer discussing her mom's will and her wishes. And we learn that Sunny has 4 siblings, and she has different relationships with each of them, but she has a particularly complicated relationship with her younger brother Dom. And then the lawyer slips her a post-it from her mother that just says take care of Dom, and she's very confused by this, especially since Dom has been accused of second-degree murder. She's determined to fulfill her mom's dying wish. She feels that she's the glue of the family. They're actually coming from a wealthy family, and her mom started this boarding school or prestigious private school in Toronto that is funded by donors and is for students who normally wouldn't be able to afford this kind of school. And then even though Sunny's family could afford to send her to a different private school, she does attend this one because it would look strange if the founder's own children didn't attend. And then we do get some scenes at that school, and I haven't gotten to this part yet, but I know that a classmate is killed and Sunny finds Dom with blood on his hands. He is telling her that he's innocent. She's not so sure, but she is looking to clear his name or to find out the truth. And she comes across corrupt police, as you do, and we figure out what is really happening here. Obviously, there's some horror happening. Look at this cover. I'm already liking the writing. So I'm really excited to finish this up and give you a full review once I'm done. And then another book coming out on February 27th that I just happened to own from Simon & Schuster Canada, so shout out to them because this might be my favorite cover of all time, is Where the Darkness Stands Still by A.B. Poranek. And just look at this cover. I adore it. It's another book that I talked about in that US versus UK book cover battle, and obviously this one won because it's my favorite. How could you top it? This follows Liska, and she grows up in a small village near the Spirit Wood, and she's always been told that magic is monstrous. And then one day she's caught unleashing her own powers, and it has devastating consequences. And then she's caught by the demon warden of the woods, who offers her a deal, 1 year of servitude in exchange for a wish. But in order to survive this year, she has to unpack her host's past and his secrets, and it says those who enter the woods do not always return. So, is this a romance? Looks like it to me. Small town, creepy woods, everything that I love. So looking forward to getting to this one, hopefully in January, so I can read it before release date. That was actually quite a few books coming out in February, so moving on to March. March 5th, we have The Poison We Drink by Bethany Baptiste. This story follows Venus, who wants to support her family any way she can, so she's a brewer who makes illegal love potions. And we learn throughout the story that she has this dark, sentient magic living within her. And then tragically, her mother is killed, and the powerful Grand Witcher offers her an opportunity to get revenge on her mother's killer. But obviously, as always, revenge comes at a steep price, and she has to brew up poisons that will kill DC's most powerful politicians. Through all this, she falls deeper and deeper into this city's corrupt underbelly, and she has no idea who to trust. She can't even trust herself. I love that she's a brewer. I think that is really, really interesting. In my monthly videos, I'm going to start talking about pre-order incentives when I can, and I know there's already one out for this one, so I might as well bring that to your attention now. And you get character art and assigned book plate. So I'm going to leave all the information in the bookstores that you can buy those from down below, because I think it's 2 independent bookstores. I'm not sure if it's US only or if it's international. I'll leave everything you need to know because the character art is really great. And if you've been following any of the Kate Corin stuff that is happening on Twitter, I will leave a link to that information down below. This is one of the books and one of the authors who was review bombed in that. So if you want to support the author, pre-ordering is a great way to do that. And you also get the character art and the signed bookplate, and you support an independent business, so you can't go wrong doing that. March 12th, we have The Hedgewitch of Foxhall, and this is by Anna Bright. And I think a lot of the books on my list have been starts of series, and this one is a standalone if you're looking for that, because I'm always looking for books that are standalones because you know me, I'm in the middle of a million series. I love the quick tagline for this because I feel like it tells you everything. A rebellious witch undertakes a last-ditch quest to restore magic to medieval Wales as two princes vie for her heart. So this follows Fionn, who is the last Hedgewitch of Foxhall, and she uses nature for her magic, but she only takes what nature can spare. And then there's a very powerful coven in Foxhall that is doing the exact opposite. They just take, and actually it's now at the point where magic is fading. Even the dragons have disappeared. Dragons. I love that there are dragons in this. That is a nice surprise. And then we're following a prince who hates magic, wants magic to die, of course, but then the second he needs help, he turns to a witch. Of course he does. Of course he does. And he runs into our main character. They work together to get him a bid to the throne. Sounds great. I'm into it. It's a witchy story. I'm down. On March 19th, we have Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé. This follows Sade, who has been homeschooled her entire life, but now is attending a prestigious boarding school called the Alfred Nobel Academy. Her first night there, her roommate disappears and everybody thinks that Sade had something to do with it. Through all this, she catches the attention of this group of girls who's collectively known as the Unholy Trinity, and she's particularly drawn to one of the girls named Persephone. She starts to realize that nobody seems to care that her roommate disappeared, so she teams up with her roommate's best friend, and they're on the case, and obviously they're gonna find a lot of corruption, and I think they actually find another classmate dead. And it just goes on from there. I already know that I like this author. I like some dark academia. I like books set at a boarding school, so this one has a potential to become a favorite for me. Dead Girls Walking by Sam Ellis comes out on March 26th, and there's nothing I love more than a good campy YA slasher. And then you throw in the fact that our main character's father is a well-known serial killer, and this is actually set at a summer camp. This is gonna be amazing, I just know it. So this follows Temple, and her father is the serial killer known as the North Point Killer, and he would mark all of his bodies with a specific brand. He's been convicted of 20 murders at this point, and her mother is dead, and she's never believed that her father killed her mother, but he confesses to the murder while on death row. So this causes Temple to want to return to her father's property where all these bodies were found to see if she can find her mother. When she gets there, she realizes that the property's been sold. It's turned into a summer camp for queer, horror-obsessed youth, and she decides to pretend to be a camp counselor because she wants to sneak out at night and dig for bodies in the woods, as one does. But of course it's not that simple, because a girl turns up dead in the woods, and she's starting to realize that maybe her father isn't the only monster who lurks there. Yeah, I'm gonna read this in the summertime. It's exactly what I'm always looking for. Really, really excited about it. Obviously, it's gonna have some harder themes going in it, but I do love a YA slasher. Summer camp, perfect beach read for me. Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrews comes out on April 2nd. It follows Wyatt, whose parents have just died, and she inherits their farmhouse, which she wants nothing to do with it. She just wants to burn it to the ground, but she's doing a walk through the property, and she comes across Peter, who was her best friend when they were younger, and he's being hung up in chains in the basement and left for dead. And she realizes that he's semi-immortal and has gone through a lot of really painful and gruesome deaths and rebirths. And it's all very ritualistic, and he needs to be freed from this curse that he's in, and the only way to do that is to kill Wyatt's family line. So doing that means he has to kill Wyatt, who used to be his best friend, so that is very complicated. And there's a spell protecting that property, but now that her parents have died, the spell is fading, and dark ancient entities are coming, and they have to kind of work together, but he also needs to kill her, so it's all very complicated. I'm assuming turns into a romance, but I'm here for it. Then on April 9th, we're getting Dragonfruit by Makiia Lucier, and this is inspired by Pacific Island mythology, and I'm going to read you the little opening here because I think it's important. It says, in the old tales, it is written that the egg of a sea dragon, Dragonfruit, holds within it the power to undo a person's greatest sorrow. An unwanted marriage, a painful illness, and an unpaid debt, gone. But as with all things that promise the moon and the stars and offer hope when hope is gone, the tale comes with a warning. Every wish demands a price. This story follows Hana of Terramind, whose father just happens to steal one of the sea dragon eggs that was meant for an ailing princess and to save her life. and she gets caught up in this and is exiled. Now she spent years in isolation, and the only thing getting her by is studying these sea dragons. And then one day a female dragon appears and offers her a deal. This will allow her to return home and to right a terrible wrong. But there is a prince there named Sam, who is the last prince of Terramind, but this is a matriarchal society and his mother is dying, so he either needs to get married or finally find something to cure her mother's illness, and she's been sick for a long time. And Hana is somebody he knows from his past, so when she returns home, they work together to find one of these dragon fruit, but they're not the only ones looking. So obviously we're gonna get a quest here. I like the setup of this one. Is it friends to lovers? Sounds like there's some potential for that as well. Dragon fruit, sea dragons, yes, I'm into it. To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods by Molly X. Chang comes out on April 16th. This follows Ryan, who is a daughter of the conquered world, and she hates the invaders who descended from the heavens and defeated their people's magic using unknown technologies. Nobody knows it, but she's been blessed by death, so she is able to literally pull the souls out of mortal beings, and one day an enemy prince discovers this about her, and obviously he's going to use that to his advantage. He tells her that he will be able to protect her family, they will never starve again, if she becomes his personal assassin and kills his political enemies. So we will see how that goes. I do love a good assassin story. Off With Their Heads by Zoe Hana Mikuta comes out on April 23rd, and this is a Korean-inspired Alice in Wonderland retelling, if you couldn't tell by that title. In this story, saints are monsters, and Wonderland is the dark forest where they lurk. We are following these two young witches who were once lovers but have been exiled for 5 years, and their names are Carol Rabbit and Isadora Alice Sickle. They were sentenced to the forest for a crime they didn't commit, and this really affected their relationship. They both offered up the other one in exchange for their freedom, so obviously they do not talk anymore, and they've both taken very different paths. So Carol's doing very well. She's living in the glittering capital city. She is a royal saint harvester who works for the Red Queen, and she's just ignoring the fact that the queen is performing monster experiments in the bowels of the palace. And on the other hand, we are following Ika, who is a ruthless hunter looking for revenge, and I'm thinking it's a lovers to enemies to lovers story. The Red Queen is viciously evil, and I'm down for that. I am here for an Alice in Wonderland retelling with a sapphic romance. Sounds like a good time to me. Okay, May 7th, we're moving on to May. We have Not for the Faint of Heart by Lex Crosier. We're following Mariel, who's now the captain of the Merryman, and she just happens to be the granddaughter of Robin Hood, and she wants to live up to his legacy. It also follows Clem, who's a backwoods assistant healer who is kidnapped by Mariel's crew as retribution for helping the sheriff of Nottingham. And then Mariel's father is kidnapped, and she has to go and save him, and she has to take this annoyingly charmful and cheerful kidnappee with her. So the Woods are at war in this story, and people are starting to question whether the Merrymen are still on the right side of history, and Mariel is starting to question those things herself. So I'm into the Robin Hood thing, following 2 generations after Robin Hood's story to see if Merrymen is still relevant, getting a sapphic romance. I have read something by Lex Crosier before and thought it was fun, so I'm hoping we get some of the humor in this as well. Junher has a new book coming out on May 14th, and it's called A Crane Among Wolves. And this is actually based on a true story in Korean history. It's set in 1506 Joseon, and it's following the tyrant king Yeohesun, and he's reigning and commandeering the land for recreational use. He's abusing and kidnapping young girls and women, and he's banning and burning books. This is following Isuel, who is relatively safe given the circumstances, but one day her sister is kidnapped and becomes the king's next plaything, and she obviously wants to get her back and save her sister. And then we're following Prince Daehan, who lives in the terrifying shadow of his half-brother, who happens to be the king, and he's sick of watching all of the terrible things that his brother does. And he's looking to dethrone him and take the throne for himself. So obviously our 2 characters, their fates collide. They had the same motivation, so they decide to work together. So I've heard good things about Junher and her books, and I do appreciate that this is based on real historical events. Another book on May 14th, we're getting It Waits in the Forest by Sarah Doss. And Sarah Doss is an author who I've read from the past, but she was writing YA contemporary romance, so it's interesting to see her doing something that's more fantasy, and I'm really excited about it. It follows Lena, who actually doesn't believe in magic. She just wants to leave this island and study pharmacology, but a vicious attack ends with her father dying and her mother in a coma. The guilt of this forces her to stay on the island with her mother, and she's now conning tourists by selling useless talismans. But then one of the tourists she sold something to ends up in the center of a string of murders, and she might have to start to open her eyes to the fact that maybe magic does exist. She's starting to realize that something evil lurks in the forest, hence the title. She also just happens to have an ex, Gabriel, who now works for a local reporter and wants to investigate. How convenient. Sounds interesting. I love this author already. Curious to see what she does with fantasy and a creepy forest. That seems to be a theme of the books on this list. Another author I really love is Anna Marie Miclemore, and they're coming out with a book called Flawless Girls on May 28th. This cover is so good. It follows the Solar Sisters, who are infamous in polite society. They are rebellious and rambunctious, and they're being raised by a grandmother who doesn't want to buy into all the rules of this society, but she also recognizes the high standard that two Latina young girls are going to be held to. Isla, the youngest sister, she doesn't last a day. She comes home, she thinks the whole thing is strange. She doesn't want to become one of the girls in the white dresses that she saw there, but her older sister Alari does stay, and she returns home 6 months later, a completely different person, unnervingly polite, but Isla notices that she's potentially murderous as well, and her first night home she goes missing. Isla decides to re-enroll into this boarding school to see what happened to her sister and to learn the school's secrets, but everybody involved is keeping everything that happened very close to their chests. Again, a lot of my buzzwords: stories about sisters, a boarding school, dark secrets. I'm here for it. I'm just realizing that I don't have a lot of contemporary on this list, but here's one. This is For Eids and a Funeral, and it's co-written by Faridah Adibi-Mende, who I just talked about, has another book coming out earlier in the year, and she's co-authoring this one with Adiba Jagadar, and it comes out on June 4th. So we're following two characters, and I'm wondering if each author wrote one character, because that seems to be the way when you're co-authoring a romance. So we're following Said, who returns home from boarding school, another common theme in the books I'm talking about today, and he is attending the funeral of his favorite librarian, and he decides he might as well stay for the summer. But the problem is there's a great chance he will run into his ex-best friend Tiwa. Tiwa doesn't understand why Said has ignored her, but she's got more important things on her mind. Her family's going through grief, and she's helping her mom throw an Eid celebration at her local Islamic center. Then the Islamic center catches on fire, and the mayor says he's just going to tear the whole thing down, and through a series of events, Said and Tiwa have to come in together to save it. On June 18th, we have Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. This follows Ying, who wants to be an engineer just like her father, but she is devastated when she turns up and realizes that she was too late to stop his murder. All she has now is a journal of her father's engineering secrets, which he has always been very private about, and a jade pendant that was left behind by the murderer. She decides to disguise herself as her brother and head to the capital city to try and get answers. And to do so, she has to get behind the prestigious walls of the Engineers Guild, which is where her father lived the majority of the time and he never talked about. And of course, she gets the help of an unlikely ally who just happens to be the prince. And through the course of the story, she has to try to determine whether getting revenge is really worth it, even if it goes against everything that her father stood for. Tara Sim, who wrote City of Dusk, has a YA book coming out called We Shall Be Monsters, and it comes out on June 25th. And this is Frankenstein meets Indian mythology. This follows Kajal, who will do anything necessary to bring her dead sister, Lasya, back from the dead. Even if that means that Lasya's soul will not be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation. By doing this, her sister's trapped soul turns into a violent wraith-like creature or entity that is now on a murderous rampage, looking to kill those who wronged them in life. Kajal is then condemned as a witch and locked away until two strangers show up and offer her a deal. She must resurrect the fallen crown prince who was murdered and whose throne was usurped. Somehow she ends up resurrecting another boy, and the two of them work together to find the crown prince before these two strangers who she made a deal with find out what she's done, and before the creature who is once her sister finds her, because she may be responsible for its death in the first place. Lots going on in that one, but does sound like something I will love and want to bring it to your attention. This is getting long, I know, bear with me, we're almost done because we're into July. So this comes out on July 30th, and it's called The Blonde Dies First by Joelle Wellington, who I read from in 2023 and loved. She wrote Their Vicious Games, which is severely underhyped, and people should check it out. This actually follows twins, but focuses on Devin, whose sister is going away to college and leaving her behind. But before she does that, she wants to have what she's called the best summer ever. And as teenage girls tend to do, they start to play around with a Ouija board, and that just goes wrong. They now find themselves in like a slasher final girl situation where this demon that came out of the Ouija board is killing them one by one. And in theory, Devin should be killed first, since she is the blonde. So she's hoping that her knowledge of horror movie and horror movie tropes will save her her sister, her crush, and their friends. We've been getting a lot of these YA teen slashers with these tropes where the main character is really into horror movies, but I'm okay with it. I still like it. I think it's fun. I know I like this author, and we're getting a romance, it seems like, as well. And I like stories about sisters, especially if they're twins, so there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of things making me think that this is one that'll work for me. Moving on to August already, August 6th, we have Dance of the Starlit Sea by Kiana Crystal. Apparently this is Hades and Persephone meets Phantom of the Opera. That sells you on it because it does for me. So we're following Leela, who arrives at her aunt's cottage after she was performing on stage. She's a ballerina and she's injured and she collapses, and then she lashes out pretty violently. Now her aunt's cottage is on this island, and they have this thing called the Angel of the Sea pageant every year, and it's something that Lila becomes very suspicious of. So there's a lot of history lore around this island called Luna Island, where it was a failing fishing community, and then angels came down from the heavens and blessed them with abundance. And they used this pageant to choose a high priestess, and the winner is supposed to reign for 7 years, but the last winner only lasted for 1. Something is haunting this island, Leela quickly realizes, and there's voices calling her to the ocean, so she's thinking she's being haunted herself. She somehow learns that the only way to save the island, of course, is to win the pageant herself. But she has a lot of questions about herself and why she lashed out so violently, and if someone like her could win the pageant. So I think there'll be a lot of self-reflection and maybe some interesting reveals in this as well. Island setting, I love ballet. I'm thinking there must be a romance because of the cover, but there's no mention of it in the description, so I'm curious to see how that plays out. Another ballet book that comes out on August 6th, which is interesting, is Girls Who Burn by M.K. Pagano. In this case, we follow Addie, whose sister happens to be the ballet prodigy. And her and her sister, as sisters do, they have this really terrible fight. She says some really hateful things. Her sister leaves the house, and then she's found dead at the bottom of a ravine the next morning. But Addie's having a hard time believing that her ballerina sister would have slipped and fell, and she thinks that she was pushed. So she does have a suspect in mind, Thatcher, who happens to be a neighbor who's been obsessed with her sister for a long time. But Addie has a complicated history with Thatcher's cousin Seth. I think that they have a bit of a past, but now they don't like each other, they just don't get along, and he doesn't believe that Thatcher could have done it. And then a year later, Thatcher's body is found at the bottom of the same ravine, so she has to accept that maybe he didn't do it, and her and Seth team up to find the murderer, and they discover how corrupt the police are, how corrupt the town is, and a lot of secrets are revealed. So a bit of a murder mystery happening here, and I'm guessing a romance as well. This next one, we don't have a cover for. We do have a full synopsis, but it's a sequel, and I think reading the synopsis for the sequel will spoil the ending of the first book, so I don't want to tell you anything other than it's called I Am the Darkness That Answers When You Call. It's by Jameson Shea, and it is the sequel to I Am the Beast and the Beast Is Me, which you might have heard me talk about in August or September when I read it, and I just loved it so much, and I love that we're getting a sequel to it. It's another ballet book, and it's a bit of a villain origin story, and you just have to read it. I don't want to tell you anything about the sequel, but if you had read the first book, go check out the sequel to that one because the synopsis is really interesting. And last but not least, another one we don't have any of the information about. We don't have a definitive release date other than it's fall 2024 or a cover, but it's called Gods and Game Masters by Rosaria Munda. And obviously Rosaria Munda wrote Fireborn, which is a series so many people love, myself included. I have to continue on with the series, but I did love book 1. All we know is that it's a speculative retelling of the Trojan War, which I know has been done many times. I still like, and I think it's interesting that that is the direction that Rosaria Munda is going, but I'm into it. It's Cersei meets Ready Player One. Anything that Trojan War they will say is Cersei at this point. The Ready Player One throws me off a little bit, but we'll see. It empowers 2 of Troy's most well-known tragic figures to rewrite their fates, as is typical with a Greek myth retelling. Mostly I'm just excited about this because of the author, so we'll keep a lookout for that one. That is my list. There are more. I could have done this video for ages. There are a lot of really interesting YA books coming out next year, but obviously I had to cut it down. This is long enough as it is. So let me know which ones you are most excited to read. If I introduce you to any new ones, let's talk about it in the comments down below. My next video, I think I'm just going to do my ultimate most anticipated books. The ones that I haven't talked about in any of these other videos that I cannot wait to get my hands on. So fantasy, horror, some lit fic, anything and everything. That'll be my next video to wrap up this series before we get into the true end of the year content. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.